A millionaire marries a pretend bride to comfort his ailing mother, but her one condition changes everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of hospital machines filled the dimly lit room. A steady beep echoed like a heartbeat counting down time. Ethan Cole stood beside the bed, his face pale under the sterile light. His mother's breathing was shallow, each inhale a fragile thread of sound. The doctor's words still rang in his ears. "Mr. Cole, I am sorry. She may only have a few weeks left." His mother's frail hand searched for his, her fingers cool and trembling. "Ethan," she whispered, her eyes tired but kind. "Before I go, I just want to see you happy. Married. That is all a mother could wish for." Ethan swallowed hard. Happiness, what a cruel word. Since his father's betrayal, love had felt like a business deal that always went wrong. Still, he nodded, forcing a small smile. "You will see that, Mom. I promise." That night, rain lashed against the windows of his penthouse. The city lights blurred behind streaks of water as he sat alone, staring at an untouched glass of whiskey. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. "Find someone," he said flatly. "Someone?" the lawyer asked. "A woman willing to play a part," Ethan replied. "She will pretend to be my wife until my mother's surgery is over." Across town, in a cramped apartment above a small cafe, Mia Torres sat beside her younger brother. The boy's chest rose and fell unevenly, his skin pale from weeks in the hospital. Medical bills lay scattered across the table like unpaid promises. She pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer she was no longer sure anyone heard. The next morning, a man in a suit appeared at the cafe where she worked double shifts. He introduced himself, spoke quietly, and slid an envelope across the counter. Inside was a contract and a check big enough to cover her brother's operation. Mia looked up, her voice shaking. "You want me to pretend to be someone's wife?" "Mr. Ethan Cole's," the man said. "For a short time. No strings. You will be well compensated." Her mind spun. Every instinct told her to refuse, but desperation has its own logic. That night, she stood in front of Ethan's penthouse door, her worn coat soaked from the rain. When he opened it, she froze. He was nothing like she expected, tall, sharp-featured, eyes as gray as the storm outside. He studied her quietly, then gestured toward the dining table where the contract waited under a silver pen. "Read it carefully," he said. "3 rules. Do not interfere with my personal life. Do not fall in love with me. And always act like we are married when my mother is around." Mia's hand trembled as she flipped through the pages. The words looked cold and final. At the bottom, she picked up the pen, but instead of signing, she wrote one line beneath the terms, in shaky cursive, "I will not lie to someone who is dying." Ethan's eyes lifted. For a second, the mask of indifference cracked. Then, slowly, he took the pen and signed beside her name. "Very well," he said quietly. "Welcome to our marriage of convenience, Miss Torres." Oh. And as the thunder rolled over the city, neither of them knew that what began as a contract would soon become the one thing neither had planned for something real. The morning light spilled across the penthouse windows, soft but cold. The city below was already awake, rushing toward its next deal, its next deadline. Ethan Cole stood by the window, still in the same clothes from the night before, the untouched coffee on the table gone cold. On the marble counter, the signed contract lay open, 2 names written in ink, one deliberate, one trembling. He had read her handwriting more than once. "I will not lie to someone who is dying." He did not know why those words unsettled him. He had expected greed, hesitation, maybe even tears. But what he saw in Mia Torres was something else, dignity, the kind that could not be bought. A knock broke the silence. His assistant, Ryan, stepped in quietly. "The arrangements are made, sir. Mrs. Cole's discharge from the hospital is scheduled for tomorrow. She believes you are bringing your wife home to stay." Ethan nodded without turning. "Then we play our parts." Across town, Mia zipped her small suitcase shut. Everything she owned fit into that single bag, 2 dresses, a few books, and a photograph of her brother. Daniel. His smile was faint but hopeful, a hospital band still around his wrist. The operation deposit had been paid that morning. She should have felt relief. Instead, her stomach twisted with nerves. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel asked softly, his voice weak but worried. Mia sat beside his bed, brushing a hand over his hair. "It is only for a short time, just a few weeks, maybe less. When you are home again, everything will be okay." He frowned. "You do not even know the man." "I know he can save you," she said quietly. "That is enough." By noon, a black car waited for her outside the hospital. The ride to Ethan's estate felt endless. Skyscrapers gave way to tree-lined avenues, then iron gates that opened with a quiet hum. When the car stopped, she stepped out and looked up at the mansion glass and stone, elegant but cold, like the man who owned it. Ethan was waiting at the entrance, hands in his pockets, posture straight as a blade. "You are on time," he said simply. She nodded. "You said your mother will be home tomorrow." "Yes. You will move into the guest suite tonight. Ryan will help you learn what you need to know. There is a schedule for meals, medications, and appearances." Mia tried to keep her voice steady. "You mean rehearsals?" He met her eyes. "If you prefer to call them that." Ryan led her through wide halls filled with art and silence. Every step echoed. In her small cafe world, sound was life-clinking cups, laughter, old music. Here, everything seemed measured, restrained. When they stopped before a set of double doors, Ryan handed her a tablet. "This has family details, photographs, and her daily routine. Mrs. Cole is very sharp. She will notice if anything feels off." That night, Mia sat at the vanity in her new room, studying her reflection. The gown that had been sent for her fit perfectly, but she felt like she was wearing someone else's life. The phone on the table buzzed a text from the hospital. Daniel's vitals stable. Operation scheduled for Friday. She exhaled shakily, whispering, "Just hold on a little longer." Down the hall, Ethan watched from the doorway, unseen. She looked fragile in the lamplight, yet steady in her resolve. Something inside him shifted a feeling he had not allowed himself in years. Compassion? Guilt? He could not tell. He turned away before she saw him. The next morning, rehearsal began. Ryan quizzed them like a teacher. How they met, how long they had dated, favorite restaurants, shared jokes. Ethan answered with precision. Mia improvised with warmth. "Where did you first say I love you?" Ryan asked. Mia smiled faintly. "Probably somewhere quiet. He does not seem like a man who says it easily." Ethan looked up, surprised. "You are not wrong." By evening, they sat across from each other at the long dining table. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. Mia tried to eat, but her nerves won. She glanced at the family portraits on the wall, Ethan as a boy beside his mother, both smiling, no trace of the guarded man she faced now. "She looks kind," Mia said softly. "She is," Ethan replied, "and she is the only person who ever believed I could be more than my father." Mia hesitated. "Then maybe she deserves a real reason to smile." He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "That is what you are here for, Miss Torres." Later that night, when the mansion had gone still, Mia walked barefoot down the corridor. On the staircase, she stopped a small box, sat on the last step. Inside was a pair of flat shoes, simple but new. A note beside them read, "For tomorrow. No one should have to suffer for pretending." She held the shoes to her chest, a quiet smile breaking through her fear. Somewhere behind the closed door of his study, Ethan Cole stared at the city lights and wondered for the first time what exactly he had invited into his life. The morning came with a hush of wind and the smell of rain. The Cole mansion was quieter than usual, every servant moving carefully, as if not to disturb the fragile peace returning home that day. Ethan stood in the marble foyer, straightening the cuffs of his dark suit, waiting for the car that carried his mother. Mia stood a few steps behind him, dressed in a soft cream dress that Ryan had chosen for her. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her hands clasped tight in front of her to hide the tremor. When the front doors opened, the world seemed to still. Mrs. Margaret Cole entered slowly, leaning on her cane, her face pale but glowing with fragile joy. "My beautiful boy," she whispered, smiling as she saw Ethan. Then her gaze drifted to Mia, curious. "And this must be your wife." Mia stepped forward and gently took her hand. "It is such an honor to finally meet you, Mrs. Cole." Her voice was calm, soft, and kind. Mrs. Cole studied her for a moment, then laughed a gentle, melodic sound that filled the room like sunlight. "Oh, Ethan," she said, turning to her son, "you did not tell me she was lovely." Ethan's throat tightened. For the first time in years, his mother looked truly happy. "She is," he said quietly. That night they dined together in the sunroom, the rain tapping gently against the glass. Mia poured tea for Mrs. Cole with careful hands. Ethan watched the scene unfold like a play he had written but never rehearsed. His mother smiled, asked questions, and Mia answered with an ease that surprised him. "How did you two meet?" Mrs. Cole asked, eyes bright. Ethan opened his mouth but hesitated. Before he could find words, Mia stepped in with a warm laugh. "It was raining just like tonight," she said. "He spilled coffee on my dress at a business cafe. I was furious. But then he offered to pay for the dry cleaning, and we ended up talking for hours instead." Mrs. Cole laughed until her eyes glistened. "That sounds like my Ethan, awkward and polite at the same time." Ethan stared at Mia across the table, startled by how natural it sounded. For a moment, he almost believed it himself. Later, after Mrs. Cole had gone to rest, Ethan found Mia in the garden, standing under the old magnolia tree. The petals were falling in slow motion, white against the night. "You did well," he said quietly. Mia turned, her eyes reflecting the garden lights. "I did what needed to be done," he nodded. "Still, thank you." She tilted her head. "Was that gratitude I just heard from Ethan Cole?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Do not get used to it." They stood there in silence, the air thick with the scent of wet earth. For the first time, the space between them did not feel like a contract. It felt like possibility. Days passed, each one folding into the next. Mia took charge of Mrs. Cole's care with the tenderness of a real daughter-in-law. She read aloud from old poetry books, learned how the older woman liked her tea, and even cooked soup herself when the kitchen staff was away. Mrs. Cole adored her. Ethan, who had always prided himself on control, found himself watching Mia from the doorway, caught between admiration and confusion. One afternoon, he walked into the living room and froze. Mia was sitting beside his mother on the couch, both laughing over an album of photographs. "This one," Mrs. Cole said, pointing at a picture of Ethan as a child. "He cried for an hour because he thought the goldfish was lonely." Mia laughed, covering her mouth. "He did not." "Oh, he did," Mrs. Cole said with mock seriousness. "And he begged me to buy another fish as company." Ethan shook his head but could not help smiling. It had been years since laughter had filled that house. When evening came, Mrs. Cole retired early. Mia stayed behind, organizing the photo album. Ethan poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to her. "You make her happy," he said quietly. "She makes me remember my mother," Mia replied. "She used to hum the same song when she cleaned." "What song?" "An old lullaby in Spanish," Mia said softly. "It means, even the darkest night will end if you keep the light inside." And Ethan looked at her for a long moment, the warmth in her voice stirring something buried deep within him. "You surprise me, Miss Torres." She smiled faintly. "That is good, is it not?" He nodded once. "Yes, it is." Before she could answer, thunder cracked outside. The lights flickered, then went out. In the dark, Mia's voice was steady. "Stay here. I will find the candles." Within minutes, a soft glow filled the room. She placed a candle on the table and poured him another cup of tea. The flicker of light made her eyes glow amber. "You do not always have to be strong," she said gently. "Sometimes people just need to see you care." He looked at her across the small flame. "I do not know how to do that anymore." "Then let me remind you." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The candlelight shimmered between them, fragile and alive. Then Mrs. Cole's distant cough broke the silence, and Mia stood quickly. "I should check on her." And Ethan watched her disappear down the hall, the echo of her footsteps lingering long after she was gone. When he finally turned back to the candle, the flame danced alone in the quiet room, warm, steady, and somehow a little brighter than before. The following days moved with a rhythm that felt almost normal. The house, once silent and cold, now carried the sound of footsteps, the hum of quiet laughter, and the faint melody of Mia's voice as she helped Mrs. Cole through her morning walk. The staff whispered about it, how the young woman who had arrived looking nervous now seemed to belong there, how Ethan Cole, the man of few words, had started to change. Each morning began with routine. Mia brewed tea for Mrs. Cole, then joined her in the garden for breakfast under the magnolia tree. Ethan often joined them, though he rarely spoke. He would read the paper or answer calls, but his eyes always drifted toward Mia, watching how she smiled when the older woman teased her, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed. It was quiet, unspoken, but real. That afternoon, the estate came alive for the first time in years. It was Mrs. Cole's birthday week, and Ethan had planned a small dinner for family and board members. Ryan and the house staff rushed to decorate the ballroom. The chandeliers were polished until they shone like captured stars. Mia, in a simple blue gown, stood near the piano, helping arrange flowers while Ethan gave final instructions. "You do not have to help," he said, glancing at her. "I want to," she replied softly. "It makes the house feel warmer." He paused, his tone softening. "It used to be warm once." Their eyes met for a brief moment before Ryan interrupted. "Sir, the guests have begun arriving." "Oh." By 7 o'clock, the ballroom glowed with gold light. Mrs. Cole entered slowly, wearing a pale silk dress and a smile that erased years from her face. She looked at the room, then at her son and his wife. "This is perfect," she whispered. "You both make a beautiful couple." Ethan took her arm, guiding her to the main table. Mia followed beside them, her pulse racing. Cameras flashed. Guests clinked glasses. The night felt larger than life. One of the board members, Mr. Graham, leaned across the table with a grin that did not reach his eyes. "So, Ethan," he said loudly, "how did you manage to convince this lovely lady to marry you? You always swore business was your only love." A few guests laughed. Ethan stiffened. Before he could respond, Mia smiled politely. "He did not convince me," she said. "He earned me." The laughter faded. The older woman beside her nodded approvingly. Mrs. Cole's eyes gleamed with pride. "That is my daughter-in-law," she said proudly. After dinner, the music softened. Ethan found Mia standing by the window, looking out at the dark sky. "You handled that well," he said quietly. She turned to him with a teasing smile. "Was that a compliment?" "An observation," he replied. Then, after a pause, "And yes, maybe a compliment." For a moment, they simply stood there. The city lights flickered beyond the glass. The distance between them felt smaller than ever. Later that night, Mrs. Cole insisted on one last dance before bed. Ethan hesitated, but Mia stepped forward, offering her hand. "Come on," she said gently, "just one song." The three of them danced slowly in the golden light, Ethan holding his mother's frail hand, Mia beside them, guiding her steps. When the song ended, Mrs. Cole looked up at her son with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. This is the happiest I have felt in years." After she went to bed, Ethan walked Mia to her room. Outside her door, he stopped. "You make her believe in something again," he said softly. "She believes in love," Mia replied. "You just stopped believing in yourself." He did not answer. Instead, he looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, the man who built empires seemed uncertain. "Good night, Mia." "Good night, Ethan." Hours later, the rain began again. Mia sat on her bed, holding the small pair of flat shoes he had given her days before. The soles were already scuffed from the long days of caring, walking, pretending. Yet now, they felt like more than a gift, they felt like understanding. Meanwhile, in his study, Ethan stared at the same storm outside. He thought about her laughter, her courage, the way she had defended him without hesitation. The contract between them was clear, but his heart had started rewriting the terms without permission. By the next morning, something had shifted. He joined Mia and his mother for breakfast, not as a distant observer, but as part of the conversation. They talked about ordinary things, Mrs. Cole's garden, Mia's favorite books, Ethan's childhood stories. Laughter filled the air again. When Mrs. Cole went inside to rest, Mia lingered by the table, turning her teacup slowly. "She is getting stronger," she said. "Yes," Ethan agreed. "Because of you," Mia smiled. "Because she finally has hope." Ethan looked at her, the morning light catching in his eyes. "You give that to people? Do you know that?" "I do not," she said softly. "I only try to be honest." He took a step closer, his voice almost a whisper. "It has been a long time since I met someone who was." The silence between them was warm, fragile, and charged. The world beyond the garden faded for a moment. But just as his hand brushed against hers, a voice called from the balcony. "Ethan!" It was Claudia, his cousin, sharp and restless, the one person who had always wanted more than she deserved. The spell broke. Mia stepped back quickly, pretending to rearrange the flowers. Ethan turned, his jaw tightening. Claudia smiled with that familiar gleam of trouble. "We need to talk," she said, "about your lovely new wife." Mia's heart skipped. Ethan's expression hardened. And in that single instant, the fairy tale piece of their pretend marriage began to tremble, because every secret eventually comes to light. The air inside the Cole mansion felt heavier after that morning. Claudia's visit had left a chill that even sunlight could not chase away. Ethan had spent most of the day behind his office door, his voice low and tense on one business call after another. Mia tried to focus on caring for Mrs. Cole, but she could feel something dark moving beneath the surface, something that threatened the fragile peace they had built. That evening, as the household prepared for another dinner, Claudia appeared again, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a warning. She entered the dining room uninvited, her red dress bright against the pale decor. "Well," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "the picture-perfect couple at last." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Claudia?" She walked slowly around the table, tapping her manicured nails against the edge of a wine glass. "Oh, nothing much. Just a little truth." Her gaze shifted to Mia. "You see, my dear, I happened to come across a very interesting document in the legal department, a contract, to be precise, signed by you and my charming cousin." Mia froze. For a heartbeat, her world stopped moving. Ethan stood quickly, his voice firm. "That is enough." Claudia laughed softly. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Ethan. You always forget that in this family nothing stays hidden for long." Mrs. Cole entered the room just as Claudia turned toward her. "Aunt Margaret," she said sweetly, "did you know your son paid this young woman to pretend to be his wife?" The room went silent. The older woman's hand trembled against her cane. Her eyes darted between Ethan and Mia. "Is that true?" she whispered. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Mia's heart pounded. The truth hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Mrs. Cole's face went pale. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. "Mother—" Ethan moved toward her, but she stumbled back, gasping. "How could you?" Her voice cracked. Then she collapsed. The next hours blurred together sirens, doctors, and the sound of rushing feet. Mia sat outside the hospital room, hands clasped so tightly they turned white. Ethan stood beside her, his face expressionless, the mask of control barely holding. "She is stable," the doctor finally said, "but her heart is weak. Any more stress could be dangerous." When they were alone, Ethan turned to Mia. His voice was quiet but sharp, like glass. "I told you to stay away from her tonight." "I was not the one who brought her the truth," Mia said, trembling. "She deserved honesty." "You promised not to lie," he said coldly. "But you never said you would destroy her faith in me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to hurt her? I cared for her more than anyone here." His silence cut deeper than any word. After a long moment, he said softly, "Maybe you cared too much." Mia stood slowly, her voice breaking. "You wanted an actress, Ethan, not a person. Well, the act is over." She walked out, leaving him alone in the sterile hallway, surrounded by the echoes of machines and regret. Days passed. Mrs. Cole remained weak, but awake. She refused to see anyone except Mia. When Mia finally entered the room, the older woman reached for her hand. "My dear," she whispered, "was it all a lie?" Mia shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "It started that way, but it is not anymore. You made me feel like family." Mrs. Cole smiled faintly. "And you made my son feel alive again." Outside the hospital window, the rain began to fall. Ethan stood at a distance, watching through the glass but unable to enter. Pride and guilt fought a silent war inside him. That night, back at the mansion, he found the contract on his desk. Mia's signature looked small next to his bold scrawl. Beneath it, her handwritten line caught his eye again. "I will not lie to someone who is dying." He sat down slowly, reading the words until they blurred. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt truly ashamed. Meanwhile, Mia packed her few belongings in the guest room. The shoes he had given her sat neatly on the bed. She touched them gently, her heart heavy. "Thank you for letting me believe," she whispered. The next morning, when the staff arrived, she was gone. Only a note remained on the pillow. Tell Mrs. Cole she will always have a daughter in me. At the hospital, Mrs. Cole asked for her every day, her voice fading a little more each time. Ethan stayed by her side, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes. You loved her, she told him one evening. But you were too afraid to admit it. She deserved better than a man like me, he said quietly. She deserved the truth, his mother replied. When she fell asleep, he sat in the quiet room, the sound of the heart monitor steady but fragile. He thought of Mia's laughter, her courage, her kindness, and the way she had looked at him before walking out. Outside, dawn was breaking. For the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole prayed not for his mother's recovery, not for his wealth or success, but for one more chance to make things right. And somewhere in the city, Mia woke in her small apartment, tears on her pillow, whispering the same silent wish. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate was already setting the stage for their next meeting, the one that would decide if love, once broken, could ever be real again. 2 weeks passed before Ethan Cole saw color again. The mansion felt like a museum, perfect, cold, and echoing with absence. The rain that once soothed him now only deepened the silence. Every hallway reminded him of Mia's laughter, the faint hum of her voice reading to his mother, the warmth she had brought to every corner of that vast, empty house. Mrs. Cole's health improved slowly, but her spirit had dimmed. She still asked for Mia sometimes, even when she was too tired to finish her sentences. Ethan would only nod, promising he would find her soon, though he had no idea where to begin. One morning, Ryan entered the study with hesitant steps. "Sir, there is something you might want to see." He placed a small envelope on the desk. Inside was a photograph, Mrs. Cole, smiling in her hospital bed, holding a small handmade album. On the cover were the words, "Family Moments," Ryan said quietly. "A nurse told me Miss Torres brought it to her last night. She left before anyone could thank her." Ethan stared at the photograph, a tightness forming in his chest. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and left the house. The city looked different that day. The streets were crowded, but somehow lonelier. He went first to the cafe where she used to work. The owner recognized him immediately but shook her head. She quit after her brother's surgery, said she needed to start over somewhere quiet. "Where?" Ethan asked. The woman thought for a moment. She mentioned a small apartment near Riverside Park, said it reminded her of peace. And by late afternoon, he found the building a modest brick complex with peeling paint and flower pots on the windowsills. The elevator was broken, so he climbed 4 flights of stairs before reaching her door. For a long time, he just stood there, his hand hovering above the knocker. When the door finally opened, Mia froze. She looked different, tired but calm, her hair pulled back, her eyes wary yet soft. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you should not be here." "I had to see you," he said. "My mother told me what you did. She says you saved her." "I did not save her," Mia replied. "She saved herself. I only reminded her why she wanted to live." He stepped closer, holding up the photograph. "Then what is this? Why would you come if you wanted to disappear?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Because I owed her goodbye, and because she deserved to know that everything she felt for me was real." Ethan looked at her for a long time. "Was it real for you too?" Mia hesitated. "It was never supposed to be, remember? That was rule number 2. The words cut deeper than she meant. She tried to step back, but he reached out, gently stopping her. "Then let me break the rules this time." His voice softened. "You said once that you would not lie to someone who is dying. What about someone who has just learned how to live?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "Do not do this, Ethan. You have your world back. Your mother, your company. I do not have anything if I do not have you," he said. For a moment, the air between them held every word they had not said. Then Mia shook her head, wiping her eyes. "It is too late." He let his hand fall slowly. "If you ever change your mind," he said softly, "you will know where to find me." He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, she called out, "Ethan." He stopped. "Tell her I am glad she is better," she said, "and tell her I kept the shoes." He smiled faintly, nodding once before walking away. That night, Ethan returned to the hospital. Mrs. Cole was awake, her eyes weak but kind. "Did you find her?" she asked. "Yes," he said quietly, "but she is not coming back." Mrs. Cole sighed. "You cannot force love, my son, but you can prove it." Her words stayed with him. Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into something new. He called his board, redirected company funds, and began building a new foundation, a program for heart patients who could not afford surgery. He named it the Hope Initiative, inspired by Mia's brother, Daniel. When reporters asked why, he said simply, "Because kindness saved my family once. It is time we return the favor." Weeks later, Mia saw the news while serving coffee at a small bakery where she had started working. The photo on the television showed Ethan standing beside Mrs. Cole, cutting the ribbon for the foundation. At his feet, near the podium, sat a small glass case displaying something familiar, a pair of flat shoes. Her breath caught. The caption below read, "For the woman who taught me honesty and the meaning of real love." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You kept them." At that same moment, miles away, Ethan looked up at the same gray sky that stretched above her city. For the first time, he smiled without pretending. He did not know if Mia would ever return, but he knew one thing. This time, he would wait not out of guilt or pride, but out of love that no contract could ever define. And in a quiet apartment by the river, Mia pressed her hand over her heart, whispering into the silence, "Maybe some promises do not need to be written at all." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, steady, and forgiving, like a promise finally kept. A month later, spring sunlight spilled across the city, warm and forgiving. The Cole mansion had changed again, vases of lilies in every hall, laughter returning like a forgotten song. Mrs. Cole had grown stronger. She now walked without her cane, insisting on tending the garden herself. Yet even in her joy, she could see the distance in her son's eyes. Ethan tried to hide it behind work and charity events, but every time he saw those shoes encased in glass at the foundation, something inside him tightened. They were supposed to be a tribute, a symbol of gratitude. Instead, they were a reminder of everything left unsaid. One evening, as the sky burned gold over the city skyline, Mrs. Cole called him into the garden. She was sitting on a wooden bench under the magnolia tree, her favorite spot. "You have done well," she said, smiling softly, "but your heart still looks tired." Ethan sat beside her, staring at the blossoms drifting in the breeze. "I have done what I can, Mother. The foundation is running, Daniel's surgery was successful, and Mia is safe." "She is not the only one who needs saving," Mrs. Cole replied gently. "You have always built walls to protect others from hurting you. But love needs open doors, Ethan." He sighed. "It may be too late for that." "Love does not keep time," she said. "It only waits for courage." Her words followed him long after sunset. That night, he could not sleep. He opened the family album Mia had made, running his fingers across the page where she had written in delicate cursive, "Family is not who you are born with, but who teaches you how to love again." The next morning, he made a decision. He canceled all his meetings and left without telling anyone where he was going. Across town, in the quiet bakery by Riverside Park, Mia was arranging pastries in the display case when the doorbell chimed. She looked up and froze. Ethan stood there, no suit, no entourage, just a man holding a small box wrapped in white paper. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the cafe faded, leaving only the rhythm of her heartbeat. "I thought I was dreaming," Mia said finally. "You were," he replied. "And I was the fool who woke up too late." He placed the box on the counter and opened it. Inside was the same contract they had signed months ago, only now, across the final page, his handwriting replaced the old terms with new ones. Rule 1. Tell the truth. Rule 2. Love is real. Rule 3. No expiration date. Mia blinked back tears. "Ethan, what is this?" He met her gaze, voice steady. "A new agreement, but this time, it is not business. It is a promise." The bakery grew quiet. Outside, the afternoon light spilled through the window, wrapping them both in gold. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. "I cannot promise perfection," he said softly, "but I can promise honesty, and I can promise to never ask you to pretend again." Mia's lips curved into a trembling smile. "You really came all this way just to rewrite a contract?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "I came to ask for your heart." For a long, breathless second, the world stilled. Then Mia reached out, placed her hand over his, and whispered, "You already have it." Outside, the magnolia trees began to bloom across the city, as if echoing the truth that both of them had finally learned love, once real, never needs to be perfect. It only needs to be true. The following morning, the city awoke to soft light and bird song. For the first time in months, Ethan Cole did not rush to work. Instead, he walked hand in hand with Mia through Riverside Park, the same place where she had once dreamed of peace. The air smelled of fresh bread from the bakery behind them, and the faint perfume of magnolia petals carried by the wind. Neither of them spoke for a while. Silence had become their new language, one that needed no translation. Eventually, Ethan stopped by the edge of the fountain and turned toward her. "Do you believe people get second chances?" he asked. Mia looked at him, sunlight catching in her eyes. "I believe people create them," she said, "when they are brave enough to face the truth." He smiled slightly. "Then I would like to create mine with you." Her laughter was quiet, soft as the breeze. "You already started," she said, "the day you came back." That afternoon, they visited the foundation headquarters together. The staff greeted Mia with surprised smiles, and Mrs. Cole, waiting by the entrance, looked at her as if she were seeing a long-lost daughter return home. "I knew he would find his way," Mrs. Cole said warmly, holding Mia's hand. "Welcome home, my dear." In the main hall, Ethan led Mia to the glass case that displayed her old shoes. He unlocked it and carefully took them out. "They never belonged behind glass," he said. "They belonged to the person who walked through every storm beside me." He knelt and placed the shoes gently in her hand. Inside one of them was a small velvet box. Her breath caught as she opened it, a simple silver ring, engraved with 3 words, "One true promise." Mia looked down, tears already glimmering. "Ethan," he took her hands, his voice calm but full of emotion. "You taught me that love is not a performance. It is a choice we keep making, every day. So I am choosing you, not as part of a deal, but as my heart's truth." She covered her mouth, a tear slipping free. "You do realize this is very unfair," she whispered. "You are making me cry in front of everyone." Ethan smiled. "Then cry with me. For once, let it be real." He slid the ring onto her finger as the hall erupted in gentle applause from the staff who had quietly gathered to watch. Mrs. Cole clapped softly, tears in her own eyes. "About time," she said with a laugh. Afterward, they returned to the garden, where the magnolia tree stood in full bloom. The same tree that had witnessed their first moment of honesty now stood as their silent witness again. Mia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think your mother will ever forgive you for the lie?" He smiled faintly. "She already has. She said it herself. Love cannot exist without a little forgiveness." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The garden lights flickered on, and the wind carried the scent of flowers across the yard. Ethan turned to her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "When I first asked you to marry me, it was for my mother. When I ask again, it will be for me." Mia's voice trembled. "And what if I say yes? Then," he whispered, "I will never stop saying thank you." Their hands intertwined as the light faded, and for the first time, the world around them felt still 2 souls, once bound by a contract, now held together by truth. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang softly, as if blessing what everyone already knew. Sometimes love begins with a lie, but it survives only when 2 hearts finally tell the truth. A year later, the garden behind the Cole mansion looked different. The magnolia tree had grown wider, its blossoms stretching toward the sky like hands reaching for grace. Beneath its shade stood a small crowd, family, friends, and staff from the foundation gathered for a quiet wedding that needed no contracts, no pretense, and no terms to define it. Mia walked down the stone path in a simple ivory dress, sunlight glinting off the silver ring she already wore. Mrs. Cole waited near the front row, her eyes bright with pride and peace. Ethan turned as Mia approached, his expression soft but sure. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "No scripts this time, just truth." The officiant's voice was calm and warm as he began the vows, but no words could compete with the emotion in their eyes. Ethan's vow was short, spoken with a steady voice that trembled only once. "I once asked you to pretend for my mother. Today I ask you to be my wife for real, for no reason other than love itself." Mia smiled through her tears. "I once signed a contract to save someone I loved," she said. "Now, I stand here choosing to love without any conditions." When they exchanged rings, the wind carried the scent of magnolias through the garden. "Mrs. Cole dabbed her eyes and whispered, "Your father would have been proud." Ethan kissed his mother's forehead and said softly, "You are the reason I learned how to love again." I... The guests clapped, laughter mingling with applause as Ethan lifted Mia's veil and kissed her for the first time as his real wife. It was gentle and certain, the kind of kiss that sealed not just a promise, but a lifetime. Later, at the small reception, Mia noticed something on the table near the wedding cake. The same pair of flat shoes sat there clean, polished, and tied together with a white ribbon. A small tag hung from them, handwritten by Ethan, for the first step that changed everything. She laughed quietly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Ethan came up behind her and whispered, "I told you they were never just shoes." As the evening turned golden, music filled the garden. Ethan and Mia shared their first dance under the magnolia blossoms, while guests watched with quiet smiles. The camera of the world could have cut there the perfect ending. But as the final light faded and stars began to rise, Mia looked up at Ethan and said softly, "You know, I would still have married you even without the contract." He smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "I know, but without that lie, I might never have found the truth." The voiceover closed over the last image of them dancing in the soft glow of lanterns. She taught him that love is not written on paper, but lived through kindness. And he proved that the truest promises are the ones made with no terms, no deadlines, just heart. The final shot lingered on the magnolia tree as petals fell like blessings, whispering a single truth, from pretend to forever.